She stood at the door that morning, the pale winter light spilling in from the street behind her, painting a soft halo around her hair. Her nurse's scrubs were neatly pressed, the faint scent of her favorite lavender fabric softener still clinging to them, and her stethoscope hung loosely around her neck like it had 1,000 times before. She looked at me the way she always did before a long shift, tilted her head just enough to let a few strands of hair fall free from behind her ear, eyes catching the light in that unspoken way that said, "I love you, even if I don't say it out loud right now." And then came the smile, not rushed, not polite, but warm and deliberate. The kind of smile that sinks deep into your bones. The kind of smile you carry with you all day because it reminds you that you're loved, that you matter, that you belong to someone and they belong to you. I didn't think much of it in that moment. Why would I? It was our ritual. She'd smile. I'd tell her drive safe. She'd promise to text me when she got to work, and I'd watch her walk down the steps and disappear into the rhythm of the day. But as I stood there, watching her climb into the car, something about that smile stayed with me longer than usual. Not in a suspicious way. No. It was in the way you remember a familiar song playing softly in the background, thinking you'll hum it later, not realizing that it's about to become the most haunting melody you'll ever know. I replayed that smile in my mind while I made coffee, while I washed the dishes, while the house sat quiet in her absence. It was a piece of her I thought was mine alone, a small, sacred thing. If someone had told me then that by nightfall that same smile would tear a hole through my chest, I would have laughed. But the truth was already in motion, and I had no idea it was coming for me, because hours later, without warning, that very smile, my smile, would stare back at me from someone else's world, frozen in a photograph I was never meant to see, attached to a moment that didn't belong to me, wrapped around a truth that would change everything. And as the hours unfolded, the perfect normality of the morning would start to unravel, thread by thread, until the life I thought I was living no longer existed. If you've ever laid next to someone who made you feel completely alone, then maybe this story isn't just mine, it's ours. And if that's true, subscribe, because stories like this deserve to be heard by those who understand. The routine that seemed perfect was, in hindsight, a carefully painted illusion, though at the time I would have sworn it was the truth. Every day followed the same comforting script. She'd leave for her shift just after sunrise. I'd watch her drive away. And by the time I sat down at my desk, she'd already sent me a quick message. Sometimes just a heart emoji. Sometimes a photo of her coffee in the hospital break room. Little things that made me feel connected to her even when she was miles away. In the evenings, she'd come home with that exhausted but satisfied look nurses get after a long day. The kind of look that says they've seen too much and done too much, but they're still proud of the lives they've touched. We'd eat dinner together. She'd tell me a funny patient story she could share without breaking confidentiality. We'd watch a show, and then we'd fall asleep tangled in each other's arms. I thought that was love. I thought that was what stability looked like. And maybe for a time it was. But there's something dangerous about routines. They can hide the cracks until the day the light hits at just the right angle and you see how deep those fractures run. That day, the light came in the form of a notification I almost didn't check. I was scrolling through my phone half distracted when I saw my name tag in a group photo from an old friend's social media post. At first, I thought nothing of it. Maybe it was just one of those nostalgia posts people make from years past. But when I opened it, my breath caught. In the corner of the frame, blurred slightly by the focus on the main subjects, was her, my wife, not in the hospital, not in scrubs, but in casual clothes, standing next to a man I didn't recognize, her body angled toward him in a way that spoke of comfort and familiarity. And there it was again, the same smile she had given me just hours earlier, that same gentle tilt of her head, the same warmth in her eyes. Only this time it wasn't aimed at me. It was aimed at him. I stared at that image for what felt like forever, my thumb hovering over the screen as if touching it might make it disappear. 1,000 rationalizations fought their way into my mind. Maybe it was an old photo, maybe it was work-related, maybe it was nothing at all. But there was something in her posture, something in the way she leaned toward him, that made every defense crumble. I zoomed in, desperate for answers, scanning the background for clues, my heart pounding in my ears. Behind them was a café I didn't recognize, sunlight spilling in through large windows, and on the table beside them sat 2 untouched cups of coffee, steam still curling into the air. This wasn't from years ago. This was today. This was while she was supposed to be at work. My mind raced through the morning. The kiss, the smile, the sound of her car pulling away. Had she gone straight there? Had she lied to my face without even flinching? I wanted to believe there was an explanation, but as I stared at that frozen moment in time, I felt something inside me begin to shift. The trust that had been the foundation of our life started to splinter, and no matter how hard I tried to hold it together, the cracks were spreading faster than I could stop them. I closed the photo, then opened it again, as if maybe I'd misread it, as if maybe the smile would look different the second time. It didn't. If anything, it looked more certain, more deliberate. And deep down, I knew that from this moment forward, I could never unsee it that I don't care about algorithms. I care about the people listening to this who are bleeding silently like I did. If you've ever held back tears just to protect someone who didn't protect you, subscribe. You don't have to do this alone anymore. The smile that was no longer mine haunted me for the rest of the day, wrapping around my thoughts like a tightening rope I couldn't shake free from. It wasn't just the way her lips curved or the way her eyes softened. It was the intimacy behind it, the unspoken language two people share when they're not just standing near each other, but connected in a way the outside world can feel. That smile used to be my safe place. It used to be the thing that told me I was loved without her having to speak a single word. But seeing it directed at someone else felt like walking into my own home and finding all the furniture rearranged. Nothing where it should be. Nothing I could recognize as mine. I tried to focus on work, on errands, on anything that might distract me. But every time I blinked, I saw her leaning toward him, that smile warming his world instead of mine. The scene behind the image began to grow in my mind like an infection, my thoughts replaying the tiny details over and over. The café's soft light spilling across the table, the way her hand rested loosely on the edge of the seat, as if ready to lean in further, the faint shadow of her stethoscope still hanging from her neck like a forgotten piece of the life she was supposed to be living that morning. I imagined the smell of coffee, the low hum of conversation around them, the way her laughter, the one I thought was reserved for me, might have danced across the table to him. I zoomed in again on the photo, my eyes catching something I'd missed before, his hand halfway between them, fingers curled in a way that felt almost hesitant, like they were on the edge of touching but holding back. And then I realized maybe that's why the photo felt so damning, because it captured a moment of almost touching, almost crossing the line. Or maybe they already had, and this was just one of the moments they didn't care who saw. The unanswered questions started piling up, each one heavier than the last. Who was he? How long had they known each other? Was this the first time, or had there been dozens of smiles like this that I'd never seen? Was this lunch before a shift, or had the shift been a lie altogether? My mind looped through scenarios, some rational, some wild, all painful. I thought about calling her, about asking directly. But I knew my voice would betray me, the tremor, the hesitation, the quiet ache she would hear instantly. And part of me didn't want to give her the satisfaction of knowing how much I'd already begun to fall apart. The confrontation became inevitable in my mind, though I didn't yet know when or how it would happen. I played out the conversation in my head. Her sitting at the kitchen table, me standing with the phone in my hand, showing her the image without a word. Would she deny it? Would she laugh it off as innocent? Would she get angry at me for not trusting her? I imagined every possible tone, every twist of her mouth, every shift of her body language. The truth was, I wasn't ready to hear her voice over this yet, because the moment she started talking, I'd know if she was lying, and knowing would make it real. And once it was real, I'd have to decide what to do about it. By the time night fell, I was no closer to an answer, but something inside me had changed. I wasn't looking at my phone waiting for her goodnight message. I wasn't counting the minutes until her car pulled into the driveway. I was sitting in the dark, staring at the last photo we'd taken together, wondering if the smile she gave me in that picture was already borrowed from someone else's world. When her car finally pulled into the driveway, I felt my stomach tighten in a way it never had before, like my body already knew what my mind was still trying to resist. The sound of the engine shutting off, the faint click of the door, the rhythm of her footsteps on the path, All the usual cues of her arrival. They felt heavier now, almost staged, as though I was about to watch an actor step onto a set instead of my wife walking into our home. She came through the door with that familiar nurse's fatigue, a small sigh as she set down her bag, the faint scent of antiseptic and perfume still clinging to her. "Long day," she murmured, forcing another smile, but now I was looking for cracks in it. My heart was hammering, my hand itching toward my phone where the photo waited like a loaded gun, but I didn't fire it yet. I asked her how work was, and she gave me the same vague answers she always did. Busy, stressful, but rewarding. It was the word rewarding that caught in my ears this time, because all I could think about was that her reward might not have come from the hospital at all. I let the conversation linger in shallow waters for a while, testing her reactions, watching her eyes. And then I couldn't hold it any longer. I pulled the phone from my pocket, opened the photo, and set it on the table between us without a word. Her eyes fell to it, and for the briefest flicker of a second, something shifted in her expression. Not shock, not confusion, but calculation. "Where'd you get this?" she asked, her voice steady, too steady. I told her it had been tagged to me by a friend, that I wasn't looking for it, that it had found me. She leaned back, crossing her arms, her gaze hardening. "It's nothing," she said too quickly. "We met for coffee before my shift. He's an old friend." The explanation rolled off her tongue with the smoothness of someone who had rehearsed it. Maybe she had. I asked why she hadn't told me about it, why it had to be something I discovered by accident, why the smile she gave him looked exactly like the one she gave me that morning. She scoffed at that, shaking her head, as if the question itself was absurd, as if a smile could not belong to anyone. But to me it could. To me it did. The air between us thickened with a silence that felt dangerous, every second stretching longer than the last. I searched her face for some hint of remorse, but all I found was a wall, solid, cold, immovable. And in that moment, I realized that whether her story was true or not, something had already been broken. Even if she wasn't guilty of what my heart feared, she was guilty of keeping something from me, of letting me find out like this, of letting a piece of us slip into someone else's world. That night, we lay in the same bed but miles apart, our backs turned, the silence screaming louder than any argument could. I stared into the darkness, replaying every moment of the day, every smile from the years before, every small sign I might have missed. I knew that from here, there were only two paths: rebuild on shaky ground or walk away entirely. But either way, the life we'd lived until now was over. The next morning, when she left for work, there was no smile, no lingering glance, just the sound of the door closing behind her and the echo of the truth I still hadn't fully faced, that sometimes the smallest shift in a smile is enough to change the rest of your life forever. The days that followed felt like walking through a world that looked exactly the same, but had been quietly rewired when I wasn't looking. The same walls, the same coffee in the morning, the same sound of her keys in the bowl by the door. But beneath it all, a current of something I couldn't name yet, something cold and steady and humming just below the surface. Every time she smiled now, my mind split into two, the part of me that wanted to believe it was still mine, and the part of me that saw that photograph over and over, that tilt her head toward him, the curve of her lips caught mid-laughter. I became a stranger in my own home, studying her every move like I was trying to memorize the lines of play before the final act, watching for moments when the mask might slip. She noticed it too, the way my eyes lingered too long, the way my questions were softer but sharper at the same time. Once, she asked me if something was wrong, her voice light, but her eyes searching. I told her no, because telling her yes would open a door I wasn't ready to walk through yet. I wanted her to feel the weight of the silence I was keeping, the same way I'd felt the weight of the truth she'd kept from me. In quiet moments, I found myself scrolling through old photos of us, vacations, family gatherings, nights out that turned into mornings. In each one, there was that smile, the same one in the café photo, and I found myself wondering how many of those moments had been pure, and how many had been borrowed from some secret corner of her life I never knew existed. My trust had once been a fortress, tall, unshakable, built on years of love and shared struggle. Now it felt like a house made of glass, one stone away from collapse. I caught myself replaying the morning she left for that shift over and over. Like if I slowed it down enough, I might catch something I'd missed. A hesitation in her voice, a flicker in her eyes, a sigh too heavy to be casual. But no matter how I rewound in my mind, all I saw was that same smile, now a symbol not of love, but of everything I couldn't unsee. Nights became the hardest. She'd lie next to me, her breathing slow and even, and I'd stare at the ceiling, tracing invisible cracks only I could see. I'd think about the man in the cafe, about what they'd talked about over those untouched coffees, about whether his phone held photos of her I would never find. The temptation to dig deeper was constant, to go through her messages, her call logs, her social media. But I stopped myself, not out of respect, but because I knew that if I found something worse in the photo, there would be no way back. And yet, not knowing was its own kind of slow torture, the kind that doesn't kill you quickly but erodes you piece by piece until you barely recognize yourself. One night, she reached for my hand in the dark, her fingers curling around mine the way they always had, but instead of warmth, I felt an ache for the version of us that existed before that photo, an ache for the man I was when her smile was still mine. I squeezed her hand back, but not too tightly, a reflex, not a choice. And as I lay there, I realized that this was how it would be from now on. Two lives running parallel under the same roof, touching at points but never fully meeting, because between us stood a frozen image in a café that neither of us could ever erase. In the weeks that followed, the photo became less an image and more a shadow that followed me everywhere. I could be standing in the grocery store, staring at rows of coffee beans, and suddenly my mind would place her there again, not beside me, but across from him, steam curling from a cup she never drank, her lips curved a way that felt like betrayal disguised as tenderness. It didn't matter how many days passed. Time didn't dull it. If anything, it sharpened, because now I had enough space to start connecting dots I hadn't even realized were scattered across the last few months. The late arrivals home explained by extra paperwork. The sudden silences when her phone buzzed. The way she'd started guarding her screen the moment I walked into the room. Not obviously, but enough for me to notice. I thought about confronting her again, not with anger this time, but with quiet certainty, the kind that leaves no room for performance. But every time I imagined it, I pictured her retreating behind that same wall of calm denial, the same practiced tone, the same ability to make me feel like I was the one twisting the truth. And so I stayed silent, because silence gave me control over one thing: when this would break. I didn't want it to explode in the middle of a weekday dinner or on the way to bed. I wanted to choose the moment. In the meantime, I found myself becoming a different man without realizing it. I spoke less. I laughed less. I stopped sharing the small parts of my day that used to make her smile. It wasn't revenge. It was survival. If she had taken parts of herself and given them to someone else, I would take parts of myself and lock them away where she couldn't reach. There were moments when I'd catch her watching me, not suspiciously, but almost like she was noticing the distance too, as if she could feel the cold growing between us. Once, she reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear, a gesture so familiar it almost broke me. But then I remembered that in the photo, her hair was tucked the same way, and I wondered if he had done it first that day. That thought poisoned the tenderness in an instant. I started to notice the way she lingered in the car after pulling into the driveway, sometimes 2, 3 minutes before coming inside. I never asked what she was doing. I just stood behind the curtain and watched the faint glow of her phone screen against her face, her lips moving in a half smile that wasn't meant for me. Nights became a quiet war zone. We didn't fight, but we didn't connect either. We lay in the same bed like two actors who had forgotten their lines, waiting for a cue that would never come. Some nights I'd hear her turn over and face me in the dark, her hand inching toward mine, and I'd let it happen. Not because I wanted to hold her, but because I wanted to remember what it felt like to not doubt every touch. It was a strange kind of grief, one without a funeral, where the person you're mourning is still breathing beside you. And somewhere in that grief, a truth began to settle like dust on an untouched shelf. This wasn't about a single smile or a single photo anymore. It was about the fracture that had formed beneath it. The kind that doesn't heal with time, but widens slowly until the foundation gives way. I knew that one day soon, I would have to choose to live in the slow decay, or to rip away what was left and face the collapse head-on. But until that day came, I carried the weight of that frozen moment in the cafe like a stone in my chest, heavy and cold, a reminder that sometimes the things that destroy you are the ones that look the most like love, that just sounds like your life. Stop pretending you're fine. Stop hiding it like I did. Subscribe, not for me, but for every person who thought they were crazy, until the truth finally shattered them. You're safe here. We see you. The moment I chose to break the silence came on a Sunday, the kind of slow morning where the world outside felt still, the light filtering into the blinds and soft stripes across the kitchen table. She was sitting there with her coffee, scrolling through her phone, her hair messy from sleep, her face bare, unguarded. It struck me that this was a version of her I'd fallen in love with, the one who existed before uniforms and shift schedules and the weight of secrets. For a second, I almost let the moment pass, almost convinced myself to keep carrying the stone in my chest. But something in me knew that if I didn't set it down now, it would crush me. I told her I needed to talk, my voice low but steady, and when she looked up, there was a flicker in her eyes. Recognition, not of the words, but of the tone. She put her phone down slowly, as if she knew what was coming. I told her I couldn't keep living with a photo in my head, couldn't keep pretending it hadn't happened. I described the way I'd felt when I first saw it, the confusion, the denial, the quiet certainty that followed. She didn't interrupt, didn't defend, just sat there watching me, her face unreadable. When I finally asked her to explain again, really explain, she took a long breath and told me it was innocent, that it was coffee with an old friend she hadn't seen in years, that the smile meant nothing, that I was reading too much into it. Her words were calm, practiced, the same as before, but now I wasn't listening to sentences. I was listening to the spaces between them, the small hesitations, the way her fingers tightened around her coffee cup when I mentioned his name. I realized then that the truth I wanted didn't matter anymore, because trust isn't something you can talk back into existence. It's either there or it's not, and ours had slipped through my fingers the moment I saw her leaning toward him. I told her that. I told her I didn't know if I could rebuild what had been broken, that I didn't even know if I wanted to. For a moment, something in her expression cracked. Not guilt exactly, but a kind of sadness, maybe for what we were losing, maybe for what we'd already lost. We sat there in silence, the kind that feels like a closing door, until she finally nodded and whispered, "I don't know if I can fix this either." That was it. No shouting, no tears, just two people sitting at a table, quietly acknowledging the end. The rest of the day moved in slow motion. She went about her chores. I wandered through the house like a ghost. That night, we lay in the same bed for the last time as husband and wife in anything more than name. Her breathing beside me was steady, but I stayed awake, staring into the dark, feeling the weight of every morning kiss, every goodbye smile, every small ritual that had brought us here. And when the sun came up, I didn't wait for her to leave. I packed a bag. I didn't slam the door, didn't look back, because I knew that somewhere, maybe even that same day, she'd smile at someone else, and I couldn't spend the rest of my life wondering who it was for. After I closed the door behind me, the silence wasn't liberating the way I thought it would be. It was heavy, dense, carrying the weight of every unspoken word between us. The street outside was still, the air cold, and for a moment I thought about turning back, about saying I was sorry, that maybe we could try again. But then that image returned to my mind, as sharp as the first time I saw it, her leaning toward him, that smile that used to belong only to me, and I knew there was no way back. I drove without a destination, letting the city blur past window. The radio played something I barely heard, my thoughts trapped in small memories that now hurt more than they comforted. The way she called me by the nickname only we knew, the quick touch on my shoulder when she passed me in the kitchen, the simple, affectionate messages in the middle of the day. All of it was tainted now, every memory poisoned by doubt. This wasn't just about the possibility of betrayal. It was about the moment I saw that photo and the ground beneath my feet stopped feeling solid. And even if she had told me the whole truth, even if nothing had happened between them, the fracture was already there. I returned to the house in the middle of the night, not to stay, but to take the rest of my things. The place felt different, as if it no longer belonged to me. the walls, once familiar, were just a backdrop to a life that had ended. When I picked up the last box, I saw a small frame on the table with a photo of us. We were laughing, her wearing that same smile that once made me believe nothing could break us. I held it for a few seconds, then left it there. I didn't want to take it with me. I didn't want to carry a piece of something that no longer existed. Walking out for the last time, I realized that what remained after the truth wasn't anger or revenge. It was emptiness, a vast space where trust and love had once lived. And maybe with time, that space will be filled again, not by her, but by something new, something I haven't met yet. But until then, I will carry the memory that sometimes the end doesn't come with shouting or slamming doors, but with a smile and the painful realization that it was never meant for you anymore that you've come this far. That means something. You felt this. You lived it. Maybe not this exact story, but your own version of it. So if you're still here, still breathing under the weight of something they'll never apologize for, hit subscribe. Because no one should walk through this kind of betrayal alone. And if no one else says it, I will. I'm glad you're still here.